Well, one of our favorite campaign experts is today getting national attention after declaring that the media at large is unworthy of the trust of the American people. And a new poll suggests that he is quite right. When asked by Gallup how much trust and confidence people put in the mass media, 60% said not very much or none at all. 40% say they have a great deal of trust, or at least a fair amount. And while the numbers are not good, Pat Caddell says the reasons why are obvious.
The press's job is to stand on the ramparts and protect the liberty and freedom of all of us from a government and from organized governmental power. When they desert those ramparts and they go to serve to decide that they will now become an active participants, when they decide that their job is not simply is both to tell you who you may vote for and who you may not, but worse. And this is the danger of the last 2 weeks. What truth you may know as an American and what truth you are not allowed to know. They have then made themselves a fundamental threat to the democracy and, in my opinion, made themselves the enemy of the American people.
Wow. Pat Caddell is a former pollster for President Jimmy Carter and a Fox News contributor and co-host of Campaign Insiders. Doug Schoen is a former advisor to President Bill Clinton, also a Fox News contributor, and co-host of that same show, Campaign Insiders as well. That airs here on the Fox News channel. It's 5:30 Sunday nights.
Yes,
okay. So fired up, Pat Caddell. What's that about?
Well, it's about what I feel is we're entering territory we've never entered before. We've had over the years the press being more and more biased. The Gallup poll is the highest it's ever registered in people knowing that they're not being told the full story. But we've never had a situation where the press has purposely decided to pick up a narrative from the White House to not tell people things that happened in order to support their overwhelming candidate for President, Barack Obama. And that's what I think this is not about partisanship. This is about danger, because the reason that with the First Amendment exists without any checks and balances on the media is because they're supposed to protect the people. That's the implicit bargain. Not that we're supposed to become a version of Pravda, which is what we've been seeing. When the New York Times takes 2 weeks to run anything on this subject, when we have 20 embassies under assault right after the events in Libya and nobody runs it on the air in the major networks, we have a problem.
You know, Doug, David Carr of the New York Times wrote a piece saying, look, you've got the Wall Street Journal, you got Fox News, you've got some online sources. So, these cries of media bias are really not valid because, if the media is so liberal, then why do you have all these organizations thriving?
Well, I'd say the dominant force, I agree with Pat, dominant force is a liberal media that is driving a narrative that President Obama is reelected, no big deal about what happened in the Middle East initially until it became clear that it was a terrorist attack that was orchestrated potentially by al-Qaeda. And I think that Pat is right. There is a narrative that is being used to drive this campaign in a way that is effectively complicit with the Obama campaign. Now, of course, there are right-wing or centrist outlets in the media, but I dare say that most of the outlets you mentioned and David Carr mentioned are more fair and balanced than what we see in the mainstream media.
We have a huge echo chamber, which is the mainstream media, because the networks, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and how they cover things. It is dominant, and it's reinforcing. What was the big story after Libya? How Governor Romney screwed up. I wouldn't have gone out and spoken when he spoke.
And what a terrible film.
And what a terrible film. What an awful film. I mean, this makeup, it is a tissue of lies being told here. And by the way, and I can tell you, it's being orchestrated by Tom Donilon, who is as I've said before, the leaker-in-chief on the leaks, who was not investigated. And
he's a former political operative.
He's a political operative, not a national security person. He and David Plouffe sat there and said, we have to protect the narrative we have. And you know what they can
count on? And a man in his role is not supposed to be politicizing. And that's your supposition that he's the leaker-in-chief, I should say.
I was obviously a principal advisor to Bill Clinton in 1996. And I would tell you, Sandy Berger, the national security advisor, did come to our political meetings, but with the express purpose of making sure that the political staff, the political team, did not offer national security advice.
Well,
and Berger and the president were clear. We're there to provide political advice, not national security.
And when politics are influencing the national security
that's very
decisions
dangerous.
or announcements that are being made to the American public, we're in a dangerous place.
We are.
The press's job is to go after everybody. That was part of my speech, which is what they did. In 1979, when I watched some of your show earlier today, I'm watching the arguments in defense of this. You know, about the president, I said that any other president, Democrat or Republican, would have been crucified while the council was still smoking to go to Las Vegas for a fundraiser instead of being in the Oval Office doing his job. Jimmy Carter, when the hostage was seized in 1979, we were behind Ted Kennedy. The senior campaign people, the four senior people, Hamilton, Jordan, Jody Powell, Jerry Rafshoon, and myself, went in and argued with him that he had to continue to campaign. You know what President Carter said? Absolutely not. My job right now is I need to be here, not on the road. I must be here because of what's going on. And that's where President Obama should have been. He should have been doing his job. And why isn't the press saying anything? I've raised it with you before. Valerie Jarrett has full Secret Service protection. We find out we're not protecting our ambassador. Why aren't these questions being asked by the media? Because if they did, it would ruin the narrative that they have, and it would ruin the idea what they're supposed to do, which is protect the American people.
Have we crossed over to a place, Doug, where the media, the mainstream media, is actively protecting the president?
I believe with the narrative on Libya combined with the poll story that Obama has an insurmountable lead, which I just don't believe is true, and Pat and I have talked about separately. I believe the
polls that seem to show
polls
him pulling ahead.
Suggest the race is over when we don't really believe that it's anything more than a small but discreet Obama lead. But yes, to your question, we've gotten to the point where the mainstream media appears to be facilitating a narrative that is not questioning the instruments of power in government, but is rather facilitating a narrative of the political operation of the White House. I don't think that's healthy for the country. No. I don't think it's healthy for the democracy.
And you see what you saw today. You know, they're using the polls of what I call the new negative advertising against Romney by the press. You just had Melissa Francis on talking about what's going on in the corruption in the Labor Department to keep people from knowing they're going to be laid off if sequestering goes through. Earlier today, we heard about the Defense Department has basically dragged its feet on absentee ballots for military personnel. That's corruption of the first order, but we are not covering it because we do nothing that will harm the Obama administration.
Guys, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Megan.
Talk to you again soon. Okay. See you Sunday night at 5:30.